Welcome to
Tamarindo Podcast.
Hosted by me, Brenda Gonzalez, a fitness coach, political nerd, and nonprofit capacity builder.
And me, Delsy Sandoval, a Guatemalan-American licensed therapist and passionate creativity advocate. Together, we're here to uplift our community through powerful conversations with changemakers, creatives, and healers.
Each week on the pod, we talk politics, culture, and personal development. Listeners call Tamarindo the Advocacy and Self-Love Podcast. Vámonos! Let's start the show!
Hello, Tamarindo listeners. Hello, Brenda. How are you?
I'm excited to be here. Hello, Tamarindo Podcast listeners.
Yeah, I'm really excited for today because we have an awesome guest. We interviewed Giselle Carrillo, an educator, a surfer, and the founder of Los Courage Camps. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But first, ¿Qué pasa, Brenda? I got to see you last night. I love when we're able to see each other 2 days in a row. Tell the audience what we were up to last night.
Yeah, I'm going to tell the audience because they could get to be a part of this as well. They could check this out. So GLAD had this event for their series called Dímelo. So it was an in-person gathering, and Dímelo is a awesome conversation series produced and created by Gabe Gonzalez, who's a friend of the pod, and it's his conversations with Latina queer comedians. And this was such a treat for us to get to go to this in person because it was a surprise to me that we actually got to have some live comedy. I thought it was going to be more like a panel. So how exciting, right, to get to have amazing comedy. And I'll tell you who we heard from. We heard from Daniel Perez, who invited us. So thank you. Shout out to Daniel Perez, who's been on the pod. Roz Hernandez, who I adore. I listened to their podcast and it was so great to actually get to see her. She was hilarious. And then we also, for the first time, I think it was new to us, met Lorena Rusi, who was also very, very funny. And then they weren't there, but they're part of the series. Vico Ortiz, who's also been on the podcast. So check out Dímelo by GLAD, because if last night was any indication of what this series is, it's going to be hilarious. So check it all out. Yeah, super fun.
Yeah, I really liked it. And I liked that we were not in a traditional comedy space. So, for instance, this was a movie theater and it didn't have like a traditional stage. And so as a result, the comedians, particularly Ross and Lorena, used the space for comedic effect and almost like an improv situation where they were kind of walking around and making the space funnier. I thought that was fantastic. It was my favorite. And I'm curious for you, Brenda, because my experience of you is that you're really funny. And I'm curious
I appreciate
how
that
kind of comedy plays a role in your life.
Well, I'm a big fan of comedy, and I think I've become I know a lot of these comics. Like I know a lot of the local, especially the women and the queer and the BIPOC local LA comics. There's so many that I follow, that I recognize, that I can tell when a lineup is good. That's how many comics that I've come to follow and love. And I think it was such a treat to get to see Roz Hernandez because I've never seen her live. A lot of the folks there I've seen in other places, and I really think that she started that trend of like taking over the space in the way that she did, and I really enjoyed the way that she did her comedy. And I would say that it's like the ability to kind of hold the tension and then release the joke, and that's something that I've learned from actually taking classes from comedians, that's basically what comedy is. And I think anyone that is able to kind of do that well. And then the other thing that I've learned from observing comics do this and from my lessons in comedy is that sometimes it can bring the audience out of their headspace when they have to switch their feelings from laughing to pity. So sometimes if you tell a story that's a little bit tragic or a little bit sad or like people or the audience could be concerned for your well-being, you get them out of the space of comedy. And so that's something else too that I've observed. So what I've learned is being able to hold that tension, being able to like punch up instead of down. Those are some of the takeaways that I think make for good comedy. And we got to see a little bit of that last night. So it was really special. What stood out for you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's like, I'm someone who I actually have notes on my phone where I keep jokes or like potential jokes. I love to sit down and like write different things that I think are funny. And now I have like 50 jokes in my phone that maybe nobody will ever hear. And I
Well,
think
maybe we
that
got to do a Tamarindo stand-up night.
we have to do it. And I was really looking for like how, obviously I was in the moment, but I was also paying attention to how they structured the joke, right? Like the timing of it and all the things that you mentioned. What about, I'm curious to hear if you were to be a comedian or if you were to put on a set, what kinds of topics do you think you would joke about? Like that would be the
I
common
mean,
jokes for you.
to me, it's like it's about life. It's just about the everyday experiences. Like, for instance, friend of the pod and friend of both of us, Danny, I'm planning to go to Cumbia Town with her this weekend, and she asked me, what am I gonna wear? And to me, it's like I finally found what women can't do both. They say women, you can't do both. And it's usually the thinking is career and family. But the real you can't do both is look cute and have comfortable shoes. And so that is my life now, is like every single one of my outfits just revolve around, can I wear my Ultra shoes? Can I wear my shoes with a big toe box that don't hurt my feet? That is all, like every single one of my outfits are just geared towards my comfortable shoes. So I think talking about my experience as a woman in this world at this age, I think that's what would probably consume most of my comedy, and that I think what people can relate to is those real life experiences.
Yeah, I would love to hear that. I feel like for me, I'd love to make jokes about just like existing in the country, existing in this economy. I think that's, for instance, like a lot of my friends that are doing well, they're doing well because they've had some kind of tragedy happen. Like maybe they've been hit by a bus or something has happened, and as a result, they're able to buy their dream home, for example. And so those are the things that I think are really funny and ironic about living during kind of this difficult time in the history of the country, and also just me as a strange, I consider myself to be a strange person. I don't know if you've noticed, but but I feel like just the way in which I, sometimes like miss social cues, or kind of the divergent way in which my brain functions, I think is something that's funny to talk about. Yeah, we should get on that.
Yes, one of these days, absolutely.
Okay, well, I want to talk a little bit about my interview with Giselle Carrillo. I'm really excited to have Giselle on the show. I think she really needs to get the word out there about what she's doing. But essentially, Giselle understands that we are massively underrepresented as a culture and as a people in the surf world here, especially in Los Angeles with such a big surf community. And so she's taken it upon herself to develop what's called Los Courage Camps, which provides free, no cost surf lessons for people of color in Los Angeles. And so I can't wait for you guys to hear it and to start supporting Los Courage Camps. So here we go, my interview with Giselle Carrillo.
Yay.
All right, I'd love to welcome Giselle to Tamarindo. How are you, Giselle?
I'm great. How are you, Delsy?
I'm doing well. I'm so excited to speak to you because actually surfing is something that I've recently become really interested in and really obsessed with. I think even before the Olympics, I was really getting into it, and I went to the US Open of Surfing this year, and it just opened up this whole new world that I didn't have access to before. And that's how I came across you. Maybe you can tell the audience a little bit about what it is that you do.
Yes, so I am Giselle Carrillo, born and raised in East LA, and very similar to you, Delsy. I always knew about surfing in some way, whether it was movies or even when I went to college by the beach, seeing other people surf. But growing up, I never saw a brown surfer. And so at some point in my life, I created this narrative that surfing wasn't for a brown person, specifically a Latina, a woman, because I'd never seen another one do it. And so I dismissed that as a possibility. But the idea of surfing never left my soul, my spirit. It was a little voice in the back of my head that just kept coming up. And at 25, I decided to conquer one of my biggest fears, which was the ocean. And I learned to surf. And that led to me starting a nonprofit movement called Los Courage Camps here in the city of LA. And we've taught over 1,000 children, diverse children, how to surf completely for free. So changing that narrative, changing the realm of possibilities for them by being a surfer myself, but also empowering them with the knowledge around being water people, and honestly taking diverse people back to the water, which is where we're from, and healing a lot of the trauma that comes with water.
Yeah, let's talk more about that because, I'm an Angelina. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I did live in other states, but I remember that although I was maybe 25 minutes from the ocean, 30 minutes from the ocean, we rarely in my lifetime actually went to the beach. And so I'm wondering if there's something there that you relate to when I tell you that, as it relates to surfing.
Yeah, well, access to green and blue spaces is a lot more complicated than the world would like to think. Obviously, beaches are free, um, but to have, number one, the transportation to get there. I grew up 25 miles away from the beach. So, in LA terms, even though it could be 30 minutes on a good day, it could be an hour and a half on a bad day. So, the time and effort to get to the beach, navigating the beach, which beach to go to. It's a lot of tribal knowledge around just being a beach person. And I, very similar to you, grew up in LA, but only went to the beach 2 times as a child. And mostly it was that my parents didn't have this understanding or even time for leisure. Sitting on a beach and doing nothing for a whole day was not really something we could afford to do financially. My dad was a mechanic, my mom worked in factories. Like Sundays were still work days for us. And the concept of going to the beach and sitting there enjoying the water means that you have a whole day to go and waste away, as my dad would say. But even going to the beach, I think that as a minority in society, that becomes very obvious when you go to the beach and you're often the only brown person there. In those 2 times that I went to the beach, I remember my parents didn't have money to buy us bathing suits. So I went in like a t-shirt and shorts and just stuck out so much. And so those early experiences too, that I got to go to the beach, I still felt so much like an outsider. So the beach is a lot more inaccessible than I think we'd like to admit.
Yeah, and I think there's also something there around a lot of us grew up with families that didn't necessarily know how to swim, right? Maybe they weren't from coastal cities where they come from and the countries of origin. And so they didn't have this skill set. And there was a lot of fear around like, don't go too far and, don't jump off any rocks and don't do any of these things that might hurt you. And so a lot of us develop this kind of almost like a hesitation to enjoy any kind of sport inside of the ocean.
Exactly. No, I grew up never having the ability to play any sports because learning how to swim, learning any sport does take some amount of money. And nowadays, I'm totally, a kid at heart that's learning all these sports. I surf, I lift weights, I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I feel like I'm finally getting the chance to do all these things. But something we experience at times is our parents bring their children to the beach and the parents don't know how to swim, but the children are learning or feel comfortable. And it's really interesting to see that moment when the parent is trusting us with their child, trusting that they'll be okay. And even the moments where they feel a little scared for their kids, the kids aren't even scared at all. To see a parent want to step into the water, but have to trust that their child will be okay. So I think parents often, especially first generation, they don't want us to go into environments where they can't help us. And so that becomes a bit limiting. And the ocean is an example for that.
Yeah, and I'd love to start talking about maybe the turning point for you, Giselle. What happened at age 25 that made you go, you know what, I want to try this? And what was that like?
Well, it's what I like to call my quarter life crisis. It was a moment where, as the eldest daughter of a first generation family, it was ingrained in me that it was my duty to try to create a life with more opportunity than my parents had. Seeing the amount of struggle that my parents went through from, coming to this country, not speaking this language. I still remember helping them study for their immigration test. At some point, my dad went through some hard times when he was assaulted in East LA at his mechanic shop. So we went through a lot of the things that just scar you as a kid. And I made it my duty to try to lift up my family through school. And that became my entire life and my entire focus for the first quarter of my life. Then all of that fell apart, where I found myself in a really dark place, which Latinos don't talk about depression, but that's exactly where I found myself, in a phase where I just felt like all the hard work and all the sacrifice maybe had led to better outcomes for my parents, slightly, but I still wasn't there where I wanted to be. And I just felt like I didn't really have any motivation left after 25 years. And so I embraced the hitting of rock bottom emotionally. I also left teaching. I used to be a teacher and felt like teaching had taken everything out of me. I was a teacher in South Central. And I remember sitting on my couch when this idea of going to do, just checking off one of the things that was always on my bucket list came up, and surfing was number one. And so it's not anything big, except that I sat there in silence being like, I am down on life. I'm about to leave this job that feels safe, but isn't getting me to where I want to be. What do I want to do next? And the thing that came up was learning to surf. Took a lesson, finally had the money to take a lesson, and then I was hooked. I started to try every single day, because surfing is not easy. You're literally trying to teach your body to do something so different from what it knows how to do. And 6 months later, I finally caught my first wave.
I love that. Talk about persistence. Let's talk more about some of the elements like persistence that come with surfing. It's my understanding that there's also a lot of maybe mindfulness, thoughtfulness. There's a lot of wellness associated with this sport. Tell me a little bit about what that's been like for you.
Yeah, well, science is showing actually the healing powers of the ocean. They say that people that live by the ocean and have access to blue spaces actually live longer and healthier lives. And I want to write a book about this someday, about my experience as a brown woman going into the ocean and the healing that it gave me. But I think first experience that I had is that for the first time, I was doing something solely and entirely because I just wanted to, not because it was going to make me money, not because it was going to make my family, have a better outcome in life. Like, it really was just this dream with no end goal attached. It also helped me be in nature again. I think a lot of people are getting lucky enough to get back into nature as people of color. I found myself doing that through the ocean, and nature, and especially the ocean, she is the mother teacher. She teaches you patience and, grit. But for me, I think that what the first quarter of my life had me under was a state of fear and hesitation. And I hesitated to apply to certain universities. I hesitated to take certain jobs. I feared putting myself out there. And I think what the ocean taught me is that you can fear something, but it's okay to try anyway, to paddle for the wave, to go out into the ocean. I started to get a sense of what fear felt like in my body and how I could use my mind to hack my way through it and do things that I never thought were possible for me. And so it was the ocean that taught me my courage, which is why our movement is called Los Courage Camps.
Wow, I'm so inspired right now. I'm ready to go take a surf lesson.
I will take you.
Oh my God, it is like my dream to stand up on a board, but I don't know. But when you said hesitation, I feel you on that. Let's talk about Los Courage Camps. Let's talk about this initiative. Tell us more about that moment when you decided to start and grow Los Courage Camps.
Yeah, well, I was still teaching at the time when I started to take my first surf lesson, and then decided that I was going to figure out how to surf on my own. At the time, my sister and I were living together, and it was our first time living by the beach. And I was still ending my last year of teaching. And I remember one day being out in the water, specifically thinking about one of my students and thinking how every single intervention hadn't worked with him, but how maybe just having him leave his neighborhood and come and spend a day on the beach and maybe try surfing could help. And so somehow convinced a few parents to come with me to the beach. That led to 2 to 5 to 10 to 30. And then it started to spread because families started to tell each other. And I remember one day we showed up to the beach, just a couple friends and I, to teach a couple of kids, and we didn't have enough surfboards, we didn't have enough people. And that's when I realized the need was so much greater than what I could just do informally with the help of a couple friends. And the name for Los Courage Camps and the concept came in a dream in a way. I definitely listen to my dreams, I journal about them. But I just saw this vision for a space where people, especially people of color, could get back into their bodies. I never had the chance to do that as a kid. And like I said, now I do a bunch of things where getting connected with my body again has just shown me the realm of possibility. So we have been teaching children how to surf for 8 years. It is not my full-time job. And I've been reflecting on this a lot lately. I manage and handle a full-time job, a 9 to 5, while also handling other side businesses, while trying to maintain a house that I bought a few years ago in LA. And also, managing Los Courage Camps as the executive director, but it not being my job actually. At times I realize like the added burden that comes with being a person that wants to give back to your community while also trying to just maintain the things that we all need to be, human and adults trying to get by in this world. But I wouldn't stop doing it ever. It's the way that I build what I didn't have as a child. And so I think it's my truest purpose out of all the things that I do.
I'd like to hear more about that, Giselle, because a lot of us, I think, relate, me, for example, I dedicate my podcast, media, and things, but of course I have a full-time job, right? And so there is this kind of way that we go above and beyond to create meaning in our worlds. And I'm curious for you, why is this so important to you? What is it about giving communities of color access to surfing and to the ocean that you think is worth all of this effort?
Ooh, I don't think anyone's ever given me the opportunity to put it so concisely, but it's a bit of an intuitive, it's like that same little voice that told me to go try surfing. I don't know who she is, but it's probably a combination of my ancestors and other guides. But when I think about, even when the idea of Los Courage Camps came up, when I think about how we continue to make it possible, because it is a business and we have bills to pay as a nonprofit. But I think that it is this little voice that's in my head that just says, keep going. And it's also the little faces of all the little girls and boys who now come back year after year. And so it's more than just an idea. I'm getting to see what it's doing to them after they've been surfing with us for 3 years, 4 years. I feel like in a way it's become, the impact of it has become so tangible. And I can see, and parents will send me, their kids introduce themselves on the first day of school as, my name is Dalia, and I am a ballerina and a surfer. Like, we are literally changing what Latinos, and we teach all diverse children. But I speak from my experience specifically. I am changing the narrative for what children who look like me now think of themselves. And so I just don't think I have a choice, to be honest. I don't think I would live in peace if tomorrow I decided to stop doing Los Courage Camps and focusing on something else. I think that voice would just come and speak to me again and again until I kept doing it. And so, I don't know what next year looks like for us and the year after that, but I know that through being very clever in terms of how we keep things running and going. I mean, I started Los Courage Camps with zero money, and thankfully now we have a bit of support from the community. But if I could make it work with $0, I think I could keep making it work.
You mentioned earlier and really alluded to this empowerment that you got from surfing. I'm curious for you, what have you seen in the community? What has been the impact? Do you see that level of empowerment with the kids that learn, and also with the families that now become exposed to surfing?
Yeah, there is a lot of empowerment, and it shows up in different ways. And I'll share some stories. I think that's probably the best way to express how our children are being empowered. There are children that have come back year after year, and they're actually getting tall enough, first and foremost, and older enough to actually be surf coaches for some of the younger kids. So it's really beautiful to see this almost intergenerational cycle happening of them wanting to also be mentors and guides for the younger kids that are part of the program. So that is happening on the beach. You also see the families healing by just watching their children experience something that is so scary. It's the ocean, right? It's the entire ocean. Because some of them have started to express how they want to try things. And these are people that are in their 40s, 50s. I don't want to age our parents, but like they're grown adults who are now being inspired by their own children. And so to me, what a beautiful way to heal as a community and as a family. And that is probably one of the biggest elements of empowerment. But we're also seeing empowerment happening back in their communities and their schools. We were able to take some of our students to the Natural History Museum, and they met other diverse scientists. Some of them told us after that they wanted to be scientists, which, I mean, I can remember the moments that I met people and I was like, oh, maybe I could do that too. And so they're getting a sense of what they can be in the future. And I want to expand it beyond the things that you see in your neighborhood. Even though LA is very big, I think often communities live in little bubbles. But probably the most tender story I can tell you is of one of our students, Genesis, who she's come and surfed with us 3 years and skipped a year 2. When I saw her 2 years later, she immediately came up to me on the beach and she looked different. Obviously she got older, but she came up to me and she said, Miss Carrillo, because they think I'm a teacher. It's so cute to have them call me Miss Carrillo. She said, Miss Carrillo, I just want to tell you something. I wanted to tell you that after I learned to surf with you, when I went back to school, I just felt different. I felt stronger. I felt less shy. I felt more courageous. She used the word. And I was so in awe with that conversation. I wish I had recorded it. But the way that she was describing herself now versus before surfing, it made me realize that it was Courage Camps is fixing the self-esteem problems that a lot of children of color have when they're growing up as the only Latino kid in their community or their school. When, I grew up in a school with a lot of other Latinos, but I definitely was a kid that never had new shoes. And so that caused self-esteem issues. I think at the most basic level, if our children can feel more confident and have more self-esteem, I mean, what better form of self-empowerment is there?
I love that. You talked a little bit about the adults in the situation. I'd like to speak to that because our listeners are, adults. And for anybody who's listening that's like me, I'd always wanted to try to surf, but maybe we have some misconceptions about the body types required to do this or the financial limitations, perhaps the dangers. Like, what would you say to someone like that? Like, how do you start?
Ooh, that's another great question. I mean, if you just look at my example, I never had formal swim lessons. There was 1 month in high school where I had this traumatic experience of learning to swim at the school, at our high school, first time wearing a bathing suit in front of my peers. It was awful. But at the very least, I learned how to float. And I would say, and arguably, in my opinion, that's all you need to know. Floating just requires you to trust your body and let go. I've tried to teach other friends how to go in the ocean, and you can see that they can't relax their minds, and therefore they can't relax their bodies. But I think that to really answer your question, through experiencing things and diving into things, which is what I did, I went and took my first surf lesson, not really actually knowing how to swim, which sounds crazy. And I'm sure that a lifeguard out there wouldn't advise that. But my body figured it out. And I think it required me to stop overthinking it, which overthinking is really a survival skill that I, still have to work through day in and day out in other parts of my life. But I almost didn't overthink it too much. And at the time I wasn't as healthy as I am now, but I figured this is probably the healthiest I'm going to be or the youngest I'm going to be. There isn't really an excuse to wait another day. And I think we also just need to give ourselves permission to be a kid again and fall and look dumb, quote unquote. The amount of times, oh my gosh, there was one time I went and surfed, and I set up my own surfboard because there's a lot to know about surfing. And so I would say YouTube nowadays really helps, fill in those knowledge gaps that we don't have when you're trying to learn something new that no one in your family has ever done before. But I didn't have, there were some videos back then, but this is 10 years ago. I remember I went in and had put my fins, which are these little like alitas on the surfboard. I put them on backwards and somebody stopped me and was like, ma'am, your fins are on backwards. So embarrassing. But eventually you learn, and like, who cares? I never saw that person again. They probably made fun of me in their head, but it's okay to make mistakes, especially when you're grown up, if you want to experience something different. And so that would be my advice. Just go tomorrow. Don't overthink it and allow yourself to be goofy and make mistakes.
For folks that are listening who'd like to get involved with Los Courage camps, either by signing up their children, or maybe they want to be involved in some way with a nonprofit, what would you advise?
Yes, so you can visit us at loscouragecamps.org. We have a community that we've built there. You can learn about our programming. You can learn about our mission. You can learn about ways to get involved. And if you want to get involved but aren't a surf instructor, totally okay. We can use a lot of help on the beach, setting up tents, getting equipment out of my car. And if you just want to come spend a day at the beach, you are always welcome. It is the day where we probably get to see the most diversity on the sand. And so learn more about us there. We're also on Instagram. And then you can follow me on my personal page as well.
Thank you so much, Giselle. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, the pleasure was all mine, and I can't wait to take you surfing.
Yay! And we're back. I hope that you all enjoyed that interview with Giselle and that you have been inspired to go out and get in the water. I know I have. Brenda, let's talk about it. What is your matraca for the week?
Okay, so my matraca, and that's because I just came up with it at the moment, is Gabe Gonzalez. He is such a sweet person, and it was so great to get to see him in person after, like, the last time and the first and only time I had ever met him was when Tamarindo had its first ever live event. This was pre-pandemic. This was like 2019 probably. And he was so warm and sweet. I know you got to meet him and talk a little bit about your lives in New York. And I just love that. So a big matraca to Gabe Gonzalez. This is a comic that you all have to check out. And this is another plug for GLAAD and their Dímelo series, which we will link in the show notes so you all can catch it as well. What is your matraca?
So last weekend, I went to a 2-day conference called Chicano Hollywood, and it's essentially a celebration of all the Latina talent in the entertainment industry currently. And they had all of these creators, actors, filmmakers doing all of these panels. And some of the folks that we've connected with at Tamarindo were there, and lots of people that I had heard of or maybe didn't know their story. And it was so amazing to see just how the event came together, the amount of people that supported it, and the amount of Latina talent out there in Hollywood and entertainment right now, including media and the things that you and I are doing. So it was really awesome, and shout out to Chicano Hollywood.
Yeah, for all the organizers and all their hard work. I hope to check it out next year. Sounds really, really cool.
Yeah. ¿Y qué va en la basura? What goes in the trash this week?
Okay, what goes in la basura is that my husband and I have a disagreement about salads. I'm not a big fan of salads. I really prefer like broccoli that you cook for a little bit. Salads are fine, but I know that for them to be delicious, you have to drench them in salad dressing, which defeats the purpose of eating the freaking salad. But I want to throw in la basura because I attempted to eat a salad today at lunch, and I almost choked on a leaf of spinach. So it is not healthy. I've realized that salads are just not healthy. Just get some good solid vegetables. So la basura to that particular leaf that tried to kill me moments before recording.
No, Brenda, we need you. We need you to be careful with your salads.
What goes in la basura for you this week?
For me, I have to say this week I had an interaction that I have often when I tell people that I'm a native Angelino. I get negative feedback a lot. People will tell me things they don't like about my hometown or things they don't like about LA or the
What
fact
kind of
that
people? People in California and in LA?
yeah,
Or
people
where?
who are from here, sometimes when I'm in other states, but people who are from like they've moved to California recently or they've been in LA for a little bit and they'll tell me all the things they don't like about Angelinos or whatever. And
Gross. Like, get out of here.
I
¿Quién
have
te preguntó why, if you're living here and you're talking shit?
I love that
Boo.
you're getting
Basura,
so
basura,
triggered.
basura.
That's exactly it. Because to me, I'm like, why would you hate on someone's hometown? Like, if someone's having a casual conversation and they tell me that they're from literally anywhere, the last thing I think about is to then give my opinion and my rant on how much I don't like where they're from. Like the basics of respeto, no? Like I don't need your opinion on my hometown. I'm good. So basura.
Wow. Yeah.
To folks who feel compelled to let us know how they feel about the places that we love.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's interesting. Then like I know that there's a lot of transplants. A lot of people come to LA. I mean, I honestly, I have in my friend group, there's at least 4 people that are from the Chicago area that are now have made LA their home. So there's so many transplants that come to this city. And I think it's interesting how there's not these particular friends of mine, but I do see this, like what you just described. A lot of people complain about that, about hearing people that come to live in LA to just complain about it. And it's interesting because it's like, this is a magical place. And if you have not explored LA, I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you are not like, if LA is gigantic. So people that might have a negative perception, I believe, are people that are not willing to like fully get immersed to all of what LA has to offer and go to different neighborhoods. They might have a very surface level experience. Like, for instance, I know this event we were just at yesterday was in Century City. If your only experience is going to Century City, then you may not like LA. You have to see a little bit more and get a deeper experience. But on the flip side, I've also seen people kind of like get it. Well, like, I'm sick of y'all coming to LA. I also see people that are native Angelinos like you that also are like very nativist, if you will, about LA, which I also find interesting because it often comes from people from immigrant backgrounds that, whose parents or maybe their grandparents, but someone else also was not originally from LA. So it's kind of interesting the way people really hone on to their identity of Angelinos in a way that isn't like always welcoming. I think LA is at its best when we are in diverse spaces, right? When we get to really see, like, where I see LA at its best is, for example, at a KCRW event. I always see all kinds of people at a free KCRW event. That's the type of LA that I like to celebrate, one that is very diverse, that is eclectic, where there's nothing but love. But anyways, that's my rant.
100%. And I want to live in a global city, so I am happy when people are coming from other places. And as a person who lived in another state for a decade, there was nothing that I loved more than really being like immersed in that culture of that state and finding the things that were beautiful about that place. So I invite you, if you're here, welcome, we love you, and we invite you to find what's beautiful about LA.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Yes.
And talking about beauty, inspiración, Brenda, what's got you feeling alive, inspired, moved?
Well, couple things. One is today I woke up super, super early. Neither Delsy or I drank at yesterday's reception because we were like, okay, we're going to be productive the next day. So I got up super, super early. I'm surprised I actually made it to a 6 a.m. spin class all the way across town in Culver City. So I got up and I made it, and it was my first time taking this class. And the reason why, y'all, I decided to take a class way clear across town is because a friend of mine was teaching the class. And so I wanted to show them my support because I've been on the other end of that where you're like, I'm subbing for this class, please come. And so I went so that like karma could come back to me and people could come to my classes. And I want to plug in an event. So on the 29th, I've mentioned it before. It's all over our socials. It's in our link in bio on everywhere. But there's a special event that I want to invite our listeners to. This is again on September 29th at 11 a.m. at Heartbeat House, which is this beautiful, amazing dance studio and workout studio in Atwater. There's plenty of parking, and this is a really cool event because I'll be teaching the class, but then producer Jeff, who made our theme song and is my husband, he'll be DJing live. And then afterwards, if in case you need a little more incentive, another thing I'm really passionate about is natural wines. So we will have natural wine tasting afterwards in the courtyard that is part of Heartbeat House. So it's a great space. Y'all, we'll put the details in the show notes. I hope to see you all there. It's just super, super fun. And for any of you listeners that are not local to LA, I also teach on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7:30 a.m. local time, but it's live stream. So wherever you are, you all can take my class virtually or watch it on demand. So I hope you all come out. So that is my inspiration is me.
Una vez más, Brenda, September 29th, Heartbeat House. What time?
At 11. We'll have the details in our show notes. Yes.
Awesome. Okay. All right. And for me, my inspiración is I took a trip up to Seattle, Washington, and I took the time to make it to Mount Rainier National Park. I have been to a lot of national parks. This is a thing I enjoy. I've got my national park passport. I am that person. And
how cute. You got little stamps.
I've got my stamps. And I had never been. I'd been to Seattle a few times, but not to Mount Rainier. And I was completely blown away by the forest. Not just by, Mount Rainier, this incredible volcano, which was out of this world beautiful, but also just the shapes and the differences in the forest and in just the fauna that was there and the flora. It was so different than what I have seen. I saw a marmot for the first time in the forest. I saw trees that looked like they were dancing around each other, swirled trunks. It was very beautiful. Almost reminded me of, I don't know if you saw this, Brenda, growing up, but the Snow White forest in the Disney animated series where she's like running, yes. She's terrified, and the trees kind of look like demons or something. It was like that, but in a very beautiful way. It was like intriguing.
So more like fairies.
Yes.
Not sinister.
Well, it was actually, there were parts of the forest where I was like, I don't know if I want to go in there. I mean, there was just, it was very wild and beautiful and alive. And so I left there feeling so inspired and wanting to go back and spend a whole week of my life at that place. So,
oh my God. Yeah. As you're describing it, I'm like, I kind of want to go walk around there with some mushrooms. It sounds either fun or not. Yeah. I don't know. Sounds like it could be one or the other. Well, that sounds lovely.
We won't put them in a salad. We won't put them in a mushroom salad.
Because I might choke.
All right. Well, that was our episode today. We hope you enjoyed it. And as always, if you love Tamarindo, if you are excited about Tamarindo, please leave us a review. Brenda, where can they do this?
Anywhere you listen to us, but the real currency is on Apple Podcasts. So please write us a review. It really fuels us. It gives us energy. And if you have listened to the show for a while, you've noticed that while there is little breaks for commercials, there might be one or two that are these, like, you're not hearing us read commercials. What that means is no revenue for us. No revenue for us. So we do this mostly out of the kindness of our hearts. And we have a lot of fun. We enjoy it, and we get a lot out of it. So if you are able to write us a review or even contribute, we do take contributions. All of that really fuels us because we do spend a lot of time making this happen, and it's such joy, and we love it, and we want to hear from you. And if you have feedback too, our email is contact@tamarindopodcast.com. We would love to hear from all of you, and we send you all our love, and pon tu suéter until the next time.
Y saludos a la familia.
Tamarindo Podcast is Brenda Gonzalez and Delsy Sandoval. We are also the show's executive producers. Jeff Ricards wrote our theme song. Sonoro Media's Karina Riveroll provides production support, and Cliva Torres edits our episodes for YouTube. The best way to support our work is to rate and review Tamarindo or share an episode with a friend. Get in touch with us at tamarindopodcast.com.